Welcome to the Wally Report.
Listen, baby, we're back again, and this time we're going to rock the Kasbah. Today will mark the first ever Wally Report Sports episode, and we couldn't be more excited. At the same time, we're reintroducing my old brand, MMA Savvy, to the world. And what better way to do it than by bringing in my new co-host, who is a composer, a songwriter, a professional moderator, a sports expert, and an MMA superfan. So please welcome in Niko Tskalakos. Nikos, how are you doing, baby?
It's just great to be here, Ari. It's exciting. The launch, the inauguration of this MMA Savvy sewed within your Wally Report. So I think it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
So again, the Wally Report is an all-encompassing entertainment podcast that does cover TV, film, sports, right? And music. But this is the first sports episode. I know you said that again, but how excited are you to be the guy that we're launching it with?
I mean, it's a special place to be. It's sort of, we have a history. We have a history of unpacking and going deep when it comes to specifically MMA and sports. So this is just a great opportunity for us to do what we do organically, but to elevate it a little bit and bring our insights, bring our point of view to more people.
Totally. So okay, as you mentioned, we're relaunching something called MMA Savvy, which we're going to describe now to the viewers. We're going to go through the whole history. We're going to tell them about it. But after 13 long years, for the people that know, MMA Savvy is returning today. Okay. And then the other thing that we talked about recently is that I told you our famous show was called Excuse the Savvy. Okay. Which I actually like. It's a clean name.
Very nice.
Okay. Excuse us for being so well versed. You know what I mean? And so today technically is another Excuse the Savvy episode. Okay. So also just for people that like to know the layout here and the schedule going forward. This will be a bi-weekly show or a bi-monthly show, however you like to say it, twice a month, right? And it may be more if there's high demand. If people starts popping off and clamoring in the streets and knocking on our doors, maybe we go weekly. But right now we're just saying, hey, it's twice a month. And basically what we're going to do is, go back 2 weeks and go forward 2 weeks. So we're always covering that schedule. Okay, right? So let's talk about the episode breakdown. What should people expect? Oh, fortnightly was the word that I was trying to think of. It's a fortnightly cadence. That's what I was trying to think of.
We look back a bit. We look forward.
Yes.
We cover our bases. And that's our format.
Right. Okay, so what's going to be on this show? Okay, so recent card analysis, which we're going to get to very soon, which is always the hottest topic. Big MMA news, and just so people understand what this is, it could be a hot booking. It could be major news that Dana just dropped about a venue, about the Apex, about a new TV deal. Overall, just large, big, exciting, important MMA news. Then there's also the state of the MMA world. And just so people understand the difference of these topics, those are higher level themes. That's our feelings of something going on in the sport that needs to be corrected, like the judging, like the whatever it is, right? The criteria that you're judging fights, could be just other higher level themes, right?
Bigger topic areas, higher order themes around MMA that we're gonna touch on. So we do the news, the immediate, then we take a step back and do sort of these higher order, themes before we go into ... Ari, what's our next? Where do we go next?
Yeah, your favorite segment, of course, is the specific divisional analysis, baby. Yes. So for each show, we're going to go into one division and we're going to break it down slowly. We're going to dissect it. We're going to analyze it, which is like, this is your pleasure. Okay.
Yeah, we don't see that often. We don't see that often in other podcasts. It's something that we love to do. We love to just dedicate a little bit of time honing in on the top 15, talking about the trends within the weight class, what's surging, what's changing, where we stand. So we dissect it, we analyze it, and it's something that I think people will appreciate.
Yes. Speaking of that, we should have started with what's different with our podcast, right? We're not ex-fighters necessarily. I did some training. I'm knowledgeable of the sports, but we're not necessarily, we weren't cage side announcers or commentators, even though I got close, and we'll talk about that.
You did.
But
Tell
what
us
we
about
bring
that.
is we're super fans. We bring a different perspective of what the fans want to hear about. There is some great podcasts that we love, but we're going to take it. We go the extra mile to dissect and to analyze divisions, analyze bookings. Why hasn't this person been fighting? Analyze rule changes, analyze just our feelings on the sport that I think the overall fans are going to really like, because they're more like us. And maybe even talk about frustrations we have of certain card bookings and things like that.
Absolutely.
That the other guys don't want to touch on.
Exactly. So we're going to have a fresh perspective. It's going to be a Superfan's perspective. We're going to give you some breadth and some depth, right? Breadth,
Yes.
we're going to cover a lot of areas, but we're also going to go deep. And that's what we're going to, we're saying that's our
give
commitment
to the world
to you.
here.
Yes.
Yes. And then the final couple things that we're going to do to bring that home is upcoming card analysis and our world-renowned fight picks. I used to do this back in the Savvy days. It was the biggest thing. I held the lead for a long time, because we're going to talk about that each time, who has the lead in the overall picks. And then the final segment is a if you were to touch segment. It's sort of like it goes hand in hand with the picks, but
Absolutely.
It's a little bit more about since we're looking at the lines, we're looking at the analysis. If you were to touch, we're going to give you some gambling tips on some good value bets. Okay. And that's going to be the finale of each show. All right. So before we go along, let's just take a quick break from our sponsors. Okay. And we're back to the show, baby. So listen, this is a special premiere episode. So before we just normally we would jump right into our recent card analysis. And of course, we have the Strickland card to discuss. We have the Cannonier card that just happened, and we got more. But we want to set the stage for the audience so they understand our backgrounds, our credentials, why we have this deep love for this sport. And so I'm gonna take it all the way back, baby. Okay, let's talk about how I became an MMA enthusiast, if you will. We're going to go all the way back to the 80s and the 90s, especially the 80s. When we were kids, we're from a similar generation. I was obsessed with action movies, with karate movies, with kung fu movies, especially when it would be tournament fighting themes. And then that's later, of course, what UFC really becomes. But before we get there, so I was huge into Van Damme, Seagal, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, anything to do with hand-to-hand combat, especially Van Damme, because of and I'm sure a lot of MMA fans on the show, Bloodsport and Kickboxer were huge influences. And really, I would watch anything from American Ninja to King of the Kickboxers, even the B-movie stuff. We didn't miss anything to do with that. I was big into it. Really quickly, I know we talked about this, Niko. You were more of yes, I like Bruce Lee, but his movies were a little bit earlier. So just quickly say your Bruce Lee.
I had neighbors that I grew up with that were all into the Bruce Lee, and we would watch those old videos. Just we would devour those, and it was really all about that era of like the Bruce Lee versus the Chuck Norris and all of his movies, and just Bruce Lee and Kung Fu was sort of like the ultimate art, mixed martial art. In my mind at that time, that was where the seed was planted for me.
Yeah, so not necessarily mixed martial art yet, but just overall ultimate martial art. Later, art. Yes,
Later
got
it.
Got
evolved, and I didn't have as much of the line of sight that you did on the Van Damme and all that. I, of course, just preferred.
I don't know how you weren't watching the Van Dammes,
I wasn't devouring
baby.
that. It was an early sort of seeping into the Bruce Lee and the Kung Fu.
Okay,
that was where it really resonated for me as a young. And then I separate from you, Ari, who sort of really has been a lifelong fan right? And a lifelong sort of devoted. I had this sort of early impression, and then I didn't have that same exposure to all of this, and it wasn't in my purview. I'm a composer. I'm a musician. I have work in insights and analytics. It's not just hasn't been, but it was more recently where the love of MMA was sparked, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So okay. After the 80s and the 90s, of course, of all that stuff. Also, at the same time, I was a massive boxing fan as a kid. We grew up in the Tyson generation. He was larger than life.
Absolutely.
Right? Before that, too. Ali. I cared a lot. I started watching ESPN classics in my in my teen years, and I would go through all these like binges on old boxers like Marciano and Ali, and all these different guys. And so I was really obsessed with especially the heavyweight champ. Then after, I was really bummed when Tyson went down, and then we kind of got into the Holyfield generation, and then the Lennox Lewis, and by then I was pretty much done. I'm like, all right, I don't care anymore. I don't watch a shred of boxing anymore. I know Richard F, who's listening in, is going to be pissed about that comment. That's okay. We'll come back to that. Then on top of it, I was, as a very young kid in the 80s also, I was a big WWF super fan. I was a Hulkamaniac, but of course I liked The Warrior. I liked Macho Man, all the classic. Yeah, he was clean. He was very early on. That's like
Randy was savage. You got the Hulk,
Macho Man, baby.
Macho Man, all that. I had that early exposure as well. That was sort of sitting there in my sort of the origin story for me was also a little
bit there too, right? And so then by the early 90s that fizzled out, because once you get to a certain age, you realize wrestling's fake, and you're kind of like
exactly. Yes.
But right at that time in the late 80s to early 90s, this is a key part. There always was the discussion of, all right, let's take Bruce Lee, let's take Jet Li, let's take Jackie Chan, whoever, but they were sort of like versus a boxer that we knew or a wrestler that we knew, who would win between Hulk and this stuff. And then you started realizing, okay, well, what about Kung Fu versus a boxer? Who would actually win that? And there would always be this playground discussion of that, especially in Rocky. Remember in Rocky 3, Mr. T comes over, and it's kind of like, he boxes, but also Hulk Hogan comes in the beginning of the movie and throws Rocky out of the ring. So there was always that discussion of like, well, who would actually win if you merged that kind of stuff, right? So,
and essentially,
enter. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I think that's where the rise of the UFC answered that question. It hit that sweet spot, that question, that's sort of the discussion on the playground that everyone sort of wondered about.
Yes.
Here you now start to answer that question.
So in the early 90s, the UFC is born. UFC 1, and I looked this up just to double check, comes out in 1993. And it introduces the world to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And then the Gracie family. They actually put it on because they started saying, you know what? We can beat anybody. Jiu-Jitsu will take out anybody. And so they actually funded the initial UFC 1 way before Dana and the Fertittas owned UFC. That was later, okay? Gracie comes out and he wins 3 of the first 4. Then there's larger-than-life characters like Shamrock, Ken Shamrock, later going into Don Fry, Mark Coleman. So from UFC 1 through 10, by the mid-90s, we were getting the DVDs. It was harder to watch because we were a kid. We didn't have the pay-per-views. It was still an underground sport, but we were like dialed in somewhat. We were keeping up on it. We were wowed by Gracie. I was more of a Shamrock fan because I like the physique, like the big wrestler-looking guys, and I didn't understand how this 185-pound guy in a gi was submit. I didn't understand submissions. It was like a little bit, why are they tapping out? I was like, why isn't this big guy just smashing him? I don't understand, but it was very impressive. So what they did was they said jiu-jitsu is number 1. However, then the American wrestler kind of came back and was like, no, Mark Coleman came in Hammer House, and they found a way to be able to sort of nullify this jiu-jitsu. But then the strikers were getting walloped, and then they're like, geez, we can't, our sports can't be thought of as lesser. So we need to learn grappling so that we can win when we're on the feet and then be able to stuff a takedown or deal with the submission defense, right?
They almost were compelled to become multidimensional from a single dimensional.
And that's what was happening, because the strikers if you watch the first couples, the strikers get mauled quickly. And you're like, geez, I was really shocked, because I'm thinking, what happened to my karate guys? What happened to my kung fu guys? But as soon as they're taken down, their skills are done. And then you're on the ground with a boa constrictor.
That mystique with that balloon was inflated, was like popped.
Yes. So, okay. So I was relatively a fan. We were younger and we were watching some. And then what happened was there was like a lull for a couple years. What happened was in around the late 90s, buzz around a new wrestling champion in the UFC, a guy named by the name of Tito Ortiz, who we all know. He starts coming up the ranks and he is out wrestling everybody. Okay, following in the tradition of that American wrestler that Mark Coleman kind of set. Okay, he brought that back to prominence, but he was a bit disrespectful. I didn't love him at first, and then he started this big beef with my old hero, Ken Shamrock. And I looked it up again yesterday, Niko. I got some better. There was all this. So Shamrock used to be part of this crew called the Lion's Den. You know, there's crews who you train with. The Lion's Den, he was a little bit older. He was cornering guys, and Tito beat one of his guys and then kind of pointed at them and started this whole big beef. And so Shamrock said, I'm going to come out of retirement. I'm going to go after you. And this big fight was built. And Shamrock Ortiz was the year 2000. So DeWalt and I went back. We were like, you know what? UFC's back. We haven't been watching in a couple years. Let's get the pay-per-view. Okay. Now, I told you what's happened before in our side talks. Tito comes in and mops the floor with Shamrock. We didn't understand it. Shamrock is twice the size of Tito. Wasn't really like a huge hulking wrestler like a Coleman. He just looked more athletic. But we didn't understand wrestling skills. And when Shamrock looked like a fucking He-Man character, like a real, like a pro wrestler.
Yeah.
And Tito just took him down and mopped the floor with him. And we were like, why is he not getting up? I didn't understand grappling. I didn't understand the skill of wrestling. I didn't understand jiu-jitsu. It was pissing me off. And so we denounced the sport. I said, that's it. Fuck, I'm not going to watch. This is ridiculous. Why is Shamrock not getting up? Later, of course, you realize that's because Tito's wrestling skills were so good. A world-class wrestler is going to do that. And now we know today, but then I was very confused. So I wrote the sport off. I denounced the sport. I didn't even pay attention for almost 5 to 7 years. Okay? Now, skip all the way to 2005. The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 comes out and was sort of like Dana White and the Fertitta brothers. They own the UFC. They had purchased it around UFC 30, something around there, for a couple million. Then it was really not going that well. You know, they did the stupid Tito Shamrock 3 different times, and it was the same result. It was like they didn't really have, and not enough eyes were on the sport. People kind of denounced it if it was like human cockfighting. It wasn't a real sport. It was too ridiculous. People didn't understand it yet. Okay. 2005 occurs. And then they have this amazing finale of Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonnar won. And it's the first time in a long time that you see this unbelievable back and forth brawl where Griffin's up, then Bonnar's up, and it was like the skills, they were a little bit more amateur. So it wasn't like someone had such a high level skill to be able to just easily nullify the other guy. There was like this back and forth seesaw brawl you see more now in current MMA, these exciting back and forth fights, which we just saw with Cannonier.
More well-rounded and they neutralize each other's.
Yes, and it was unbelievable. And I remember seeing it. I wasn't back in the sport yet, but I remember seeing highlights on Spike TV and everybody was talking about it. So it kind of, I think I had watched it. I'm like, oh, okay, is the UFC back? But I still didn't really watch. Okay. Cut to 2007. I'm in LA for the summer. I'm staying with my buddy, DeWalt, and he's like, listen, I know we denounced this like 7 years ago, but I've been rewatching UFC. I'm telling you it's clean again. And I'm like, bro, come on, man. We went through this. It's the same shit. They're just rolling around and nothing's happening. It's like garbage. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, bro. So he showed me all this stuff because I had missed. This is the crazy thing. That all that time when we were buddies in LA, Niko, I would see the posters of Liddell, Couture, and just drive right by. We weren't watching it. We weren't watching it all that time. The Cardiff years, we weren't clamping the UFC, baby. I was denouncing.
It wasn't in our purview. It was just
no. So DeWalt shows me the classic Liddell fights, the Couture comeback. It was, and instantly I was hit like the Holy Ghost, baby. I was like, oh my God, this is better than it even used to be. There were so many competitive fights. Of course, we jumped into it right when Chuck the Iceman Liddell had just been dethroned by Rampage. We were devastated because I had become an Iceman guy. And now I wanted to see more because now I want to be like, well, who's going to take on Rampage? Like, what's the, just kind of like how you are when you're like, oh, well, who's the next guy? Like, well, I need this booked. Like, what's the deal, Dana? Well, like, where's the next fight?
And we'll
just, I need revenge here. Where's Iceman going to come back? I was like devastated. I was tripping out. So now basically, and then the one other thing I'll say is then I come back in 2008. That's when you visited me in the cabin and I showed you Randy Chuck won because that's the fight. Randy's older. He's like 40. He's like Cannonier's age. Okay. To put it in perspective.
And so when you showed that to me and I'm in your cabin in Vermont, you like sort of planted a seed. And I still was of the mindset of, come on, what is this? What is this nonsense? But there was an intrigue around what Couture was able to do, right? At his age and the shock he brought. And there was some allure there. But again, it was a little bit of a blip in terms of in my world, right? It was, but you planted that early seed. Keep going.
Yeah, so basically what I showed you for the audience here, for the MMA fans, you'll know. But Tito and Chuck were finally supposed to fight. There had been this bad blood. Chuck was the rising star. Tito had been fighting with Dana about contracts. He'd been kind of ducking it a little bit, some people say. And then so Randy said, I'll step in. Randy had moved down. He had lost his heavyweight belt. He cut down to light heavyweight.
Wow.
No one thought he was going to beat Chuck. And if you almost need to reach tonight, go back and watch Liddell Couture 1, and it's unbelievable. Shocks the world. Couture shocks the world and out wrestles Chuck and I think he even gets the stoppage. It's unbelievable. So I showed you that fight. Anyway, so for the last 18 years, I have now been completely obsessed. But one thing that we talk about a lot is the excitement of MMA is like no other. It is basically the fourth quarter. Your life is on the line. Your team is down with 1 minute to go. It's Lakers 2001. Kobe has the ball. And especially when you have your guy is fighting.
Yes. It's what you just said for the entire fight. Number one, I like to call it the primal sport. It's the sport on which all other sports are based on, that one-on-one, right, fight when your life is on the line and you're surviving and the skills you need to get through it. That's like the fundamental sport, in my opinion.
Yes.
Everything else is based on that, is a derivative of this one-on-one human sort of primal thing.
Yeah.
And you're right, the excitement level is just higher than in any other sport. The nerves, you physically, when you're watching the sport, your entire body, your entire being is actually responding in a way that no other sport can come close to sort of matching.
Right.
And so we do have, and I got there. I wasn't there. Like I said, I had to come to that.
Yes.
I had to get to this place, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so good point, great point. And like this type of sport has been all the way thousands of years ago. I think even in ancient Greece, there was an initial
time that goes back.
Yes. There's some initial stuff that people cite as the early MMA. So, okay, then my obsession really takes hold. I moved back to LA in 2008. And for the next 2 years, man, I'm watching all cards. I'm going out to the bars. Like I'm obsessed with it. And I start scouring the internet. I need news. I need news daily. I needed to see why is Chuck not booked? What is Couture coming back? What the fuck is going on? Why is Brock Lesnar coming into the sport now? And so I'm watching everything. And at that point, it was big. This was the first big major boom because Chuck was a huge star. Celebrities were going to see it. But there wasn't tons of mainstream media covering it as much as it is like today with ESPN. Okay.
Right. It was a niche. It was absolutely a niche.
Yes. And I had to go scour. I had to find the MMA Junkie, which I'm still on today. And then the Underground. I use a couple apps. And then I was working at the Apple Store near all these like really smart, intelligent, cyber nerd guys. And I said, you know what? I was so obsessed with it. People were like, and you have a good personality, right? They were like, why don't you? And so I was like, you know what? I can start a website. I can just do articles. So I start a website. I coin it MMA Savvy. I'm still wearing the t-shirt. Check this out, everybody. We'll get to my story here. So I found a company called MMA Savvy because we have Savvy. Okay. And I want to shout out to my original crew, Garrett Lamb, Ben Kilmer, Kyle Cadman, Josh Fiore, who whipped up the website for us, and Rafael Rafi Perez. Kyle and Rafi were the two original guys on Excuse the Savvy with me. But then now you're replacing. Once I send this out, they're going to be pissed, baby. Kyle actually might come back on the show, but I said, like, he's not updated on the latest cards. I said, that's not clean. That's not clean. He's not watching. Kyle, you're unjust, baby. You're unjust. Okay. So I start writing articles. I start meeting fighters all across town. I would go to gyms. I would start doing fighter interviews. We were doing videos, and all of a sudden, it expanded quickly. Okay, yes. We had a whole team around us. We gained traction, and I started. And so, what I'm going to actually do here,
show us a little bit about.
I'm going to.
And this is of your
this
world,
is something new for the Wally Report listeners. We haven't done this before, where I'm literally sharing my screen. Let me show you this. So for the people listening and in the car, of course, you can't see this, so I'll still explain it. But for the people at home or watching this on YouTube or watching Spotify video, we're now going to share screen and talk about things live on the show. It's a new upgrade to the Wally Report. So basically, I told you we exploded pretty quickly. We started getting press coverage, press passes to really big events, Bellator and Strikeforce mainly, because it was very hard to get into the UFC at the time because UFC was really big. And for a small media company, we weren't going to get in. But as you can see, for the people, this was a good 13, 12 years ago. For the people that know, however, is look, this is me interviewing kid. I would be front row. That's Luke Rockhold, King Mo, and Tyrone Woodley, who was an ex-champ, and Rockhold, who was an ex-champ. That's me interviewing Scott Coker, who is the current CEO at Strikeforce. This is me, Gilbert Melendez, who was a Strikeforce champ. And this is crazy too, Niko. I didn't tell you this the other day. Look at who his win against was at that time, Masvidal.
No way.
We're talking about Melendez beating Masvidal. So I was connected with all these guys. Then I got Musasi, who was also a Strikeforce champion and a Dream champion. This is then me with Ronda Rousey on various occasions. We'll get into this is a big part of the Savvy journey, is I met Ronda Rousey at a local gym, Anthony Hardock's gym, who you can see here. He was a famous Dutch kickboxer. I went to his gym, and the owner there was like, hey, you should interview Ronda. She's an upcoming fighter. I'm like, I don't know. Like, women's MMA wasn't big yet. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And so I interview her, and then we start following her to her pro. This is videos. I still have it. This is up live. I still have videos of her first King of the Cage fight in the Valley. We went there. She submitted a girl in 45 seconds. We went completely ballistic. We follow her all the way into Vegas and to get the Strikeforce contract, and then later to get the UFC contract. This is a video of John Jones, Arlovsky, Verdum, who I was close with. I used to train at his gym. He was the ex-UFC champ that Stipe was the one to dethrone him. So right as you were coming in, Verdum sadly went out. You just missed the Verdum era. He was an amazing Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion. Then you have, those are the big hitters. But the final thing I just love to show off that I'm still very proud of is my one-on-one interview with Bruce Buffer himself.
Right there. Yep.
And I went to his compound in Marina Del Rey. And so anyway, we weren't the biggest organization, but we were, very early in the sport. If only I had just continued to Excuse the Savvy, we'd be huge right now. So,
well, it's funny because, correct me if I'm wrong, Ari, is that, just to bring my journey into this, is that, think 2020, think COVID. It was a time for me for reflection. I wanted to just sort of reconnect with Ari. Like, it had been a while. We hadn't been as in touch as in the past. And I just remembered that you did have this whirlwind sort of media life. And I just started to ask you about it. Like, what was that about? What drove you to that? And you started filling me on the story. And it started, and I'm just naturally curious. I'm as a moderator, I just started probing you with questions about the sport itself, about mixed martial arts. And it was tapping into that early youth question about, these different art forms and which one is really the superior form and all those questions. And next thing you know, we're having in-depth conversations about it. We're starting to talk through the history of MMA.
Yes.
Started bringing it back. At the same time, Conor McGregor has sort of broken through the broader zeitgeist, the sports world. He actually,
Yes.
broke across this niche. MMA, UFC was sort of more niche. Now it became a more of a mainstream, and start hearing his media coming in, and we continue to talk about Conor. And you introduced me to the story, Conor's history, his rise, his big rivalry with Khabib, and I started watching cards. We start actually watching cards, but we were taking it like deep. Like we would just watch from prelim through to the main card. We start analyzing the cards. We start having discussions, post card, pre card, build up.
Yes.
We actually start like honing in on a specific weight class in a specific division and doing that analysis that we love to do, that we're going to be, share with you today. That's the sort of thing we were doing. And that's how I came to the sport. I came to the sport sort of, it wasn't in my line of sight. It wasn't in my purview, but through this bond, our friendship, I started acquiring this knowledge. And then I started to like watch videos going down through the lineage of fights. And that's sort of where I ended up. It's sort of kind of unexpectedly here.
Yes.
So I'm all, and I think, obviously the Conor part was a big part of it, because you were a huge fan, and I, through your disappointment of what happened to him, I sort of like started tapping into that. Like, what was that about? How did that go down for you?
Because I was losing my gourd and
you were
devastation.
losing your mind. Yeah. So
yeah. But I'm glad you brought that up, because so if we go back to the ending of Savvy, I only had the company for about a couple years. We ended up splitting up, but I was always really bummed about it. And then the rest of my life, as you know, I'm like a huge MMA fanatic, and everywhere I go, I bring people along. Every roommate I've ever had, they have to watch the fight.
It's infectious. And then, you're infectious. Like when it comes to it, you just literally sucked me into that world. I just started asking a few questions. Next thing you know, you had someone that was like interested, and then you just like kept talking.
Well, that's you bring me to my point. You popped up after years of me not having, like, it was the pandemic. I was back in Newport Beach, and then luckily I got, as soon as someone else I latch onto that, and then we started deep dive. You were like a new era of Savvy for me, right? To bring it back, and that's how now we're actually reimagining it and launching Savvy and Savvy back today. Okay, so. And because I have that whole knowledge of it, I was an analyst, I was a writer, I was interviewing fighters, I was training in the sport. Therefore, we're going to give you great knowledge. And because I've been an obsessive fan for 18 years, so I have this sort of the inside of the sport knowledge and just being a super fan, right? So
exactly.
Yes. So now we're going to get into the meat of the show. We talked about that. We're going to talk about the recent card analysis. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here, Niko, is let me get the recent card up, and then plus now you can just view. All right. So we're going to, as we mentioned earlier, since the show is twice a month, we always got to go back 2 weeks, and we always got to go forward 2 weeks. Right. So let's check this out. Listen, we've talked about this at length already. Obviously, Strickland, Duplessis, UFC 312. This happened just a little over a week ago. It was the middleweight title of the world. I'll go first, Niko, and then let you jump in. Okay. Yeah. Here's my quick analysis. Now, the first fight was very close. Strickland had been the champ, beating Adesanya in shocking fashion. Duplessis taking out people in his wake. The fight against Whitaker got him in position to get that fight. He beat Strickland in my eyes, but it's very close. He beats him 3-2 with a bigger shot. Strickland might have, peppered a little bit more, but Duplessis, with his unorthodox style and his power, he does the job. This now is booked as the rematch, since they've both beaten other people. It was so close. Dana books the rematch, and I got to say, I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Like, Strickland says multiple times that he's going to die for this fight and he's going to go walk through fire. And I know it's easy for us to complain, but I just feel like if you're already going to lose the decision, how do you not just go for broke in rounds 3 and 4, knowing that you're already a couple rounds down? So I'll let you go in a second, but I think he drops rounds 1 and 2. It's close. He's not being urgent enough. You got to win the round. He's letting Duplessis get the bigger shots, and especially the flurries at the end of the round. But it's easy. Again, it's easy for us to say, because it's probably hard being in there with Duplessis. He's unorthodox. He throws bombs. You can't hit him. He's
Yes,
got good wrestling. He's a hulk of a guy at 185. Dude, the
absolutely.
guy is fucking massive. And so then just when you think maybe Sean, he fights pretty well in round 3, and then by, I think it's round 4, Duplessis breaks his nose, and then the
And that
fight's
was it.
over. And
Yeah.
you're kind of like, okay, the fight's over. What
Here.
and you know, that's all you got to say, and I'll let you go now. But the last thing I'll just say is, like, I just was sort of disappointed because I really thought Strickland, knowing this might be his last chance to get a title fight in a while, he should have done more here. What are your thoughts here,
Listen,
Niko?
I 100% agree with the problem of urgency that I saw with Strickland in this fight, and also, why he didn't go for broke. Those questions certainly emerged for me as well. I'm going to step back, though. I do think Duplessis earned his right to have that first title fight against Sean Strickland. But there's a saying, Ari. There's a saying that to become champion, you got to take it from the champ. I didn't think Drake Duplessis did enough in that first fight to earn that, to say, he took it from the champ. I thought Strickland, in his classic style of pressure, incessant pressure, did more to eke out that fight, and he should have gotten the win, okay? But here's what happened in the second fight. Strickland's style, the way he wins fights is by closing the distance between him and the opponent, and that forces the opponent to be on their back heel, and you're constantly pressuring, and he's using his jab to just, in this steady fashion, apply relentless pressure. But what does Drake do? He disrupts that entire paradigm.
Yes.
He uses unorthodox movement, volume of throws, and then power of throws to absolutely constantly disrupt Strickland. He's never able to set that tone that we saw versus Izzy, as an example, which it was so clear he was constantly pressuring Izzy and constantly in his face, pushing him back. And he wasn't able to get that flow going. And then when the nose gets broken, it's over. Should he have been ready to adjust his strategy and not do the same old and be prepared for that? Because he should have been prepared, right?
That's my
for what
thing.
Duplessis was going to bring to the table here. Wasn't going to just let Strickland establish that rhythm that we so often see him do. So for me, disappointment for Sean Strickland. I think he might have an opportunity if he has another big win against maybe a rising or one of these contenders in the division, that he might see the light of day, might have another chance, but it is disappointing.
Yeah, let's just look at that really quickly, and then we'll move on to the co-main event. But Duplessis, and on the flip side, Duplessis is unbelievable now. I mean, he beats Whitaker in dramatic fashion. He beats Strickland twice. I know you think one was close. And then he also beats Adesanya and finishes Adesanya. He came out of nowhere, and he's the best, clearly the best middleweight in the world now. And
just
I agree,
a shout out to South Africa and honor my wife, South African. So that's I do appreciate Drake and what he's done to sort of rise from the ashes, to come from anonymity and to do what he's done in the MMA. Absolutely, hats off to him. He deserves where he's at. He's a beast. There's no question. He's established himself. So now where does this go? We need, what do you think, Ari? What's next?
Really quickly, and of course we'll go deeper in this when we do the real middleweight analysis, probably in about 3 shows from now.
Yes.
But we always do this after a title fight as well for the fans. Now, Duplessis, he's slated to fight Chimaev. That becomes the fight of the year.
Absolutely.
I don't even know who you take there. Chimaev might also be able to beat him, because we thought Whitaker was going to stand up to Chimaev, and then what we saw what fucking happened there. So maybe even Duplessis gets mauled, but I think he's strong enough. He's such a hulk of a middleweight. He weathers the storm. I think at least he has a great chance. And then maybe he beats Chimaev if he gets to the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th round.
That's exactly the big where question. I'm at with it, Ari. I'm with you on that, in the sense that if this was a 1-round fight, Chimaev wins. He beats anyone in the world if it's 1 round. He comes out storming like no other human being comes out storming. But this is a 5-round fight, and Drake has the cardio and the power to match Chimaev. And if he could just stifle the wrestling first couple of rounds, and you start bringing Chimaev into the deep waters later in the rounds, where Drake has shown his cardio, has shown his endurance, and has shown that he can fight literally at the same level for 5 rounds, It's going to be a problem for Chimaev, and I definitely lean Duplessis on that one.
And the last thing I'll say, and then we'll talk, is that here's the crazy thing. Out of the blue, if Duplessis beats Chimaev and then also beats Imavov, who's probably right after it,
Right,
he now all of a sudden becomes in a conversation for one of the greatest middleweights ever. He comes out of nobody even knew this guy 2 years ago. And then but the way that he beats Whitaker, Adesanya, Strickland twice, if he beats Chimaev and then he beats Imavov, I mean, this becomes crazy.
It becomes a conversation with potentially Pereira for like some kind of,
pound for pound at least.
It kind of becomes a big
So we'll keep an eye on that. And then in the reverse here, I just think Strickland is in big trouble now. His career is in big trouble. I say, listen, sometimes people just have your number, and I think just Duplessis does. And so Strickland still is there. He's still number 2, contender in the world. He's now probably going to have to go back and face like a Bahalio, face, maybe a Whitaker, something like that.
And don't forget, he has
maybe
a style
Adesanya rematch if Izzy wants to fight again.
Right.
Maybe Cannonier again as a rematch. I just don't know where he goes.
And listen, he has this fighting style that's not necessarily the most exciting. He's not the type of fighter that like the UFC wants to see sitting there throwing bombs, making like aggressive.
I know.
Right. He plays steady. He plays boring almost to the point where it's almost boring. So it's hard for me to see him get a lot of opportunities that are going to excite the powers that be in the UFC. So with that said, let's see what happens.
Okay.
And we'll take it from there.
So really quickly, and I know you don't have much to say on this, but I'll just address it for the fans. There was the other title fight, the women's strawweight title fight. Another amazing, impressive performance from Zhang Weili. I mean, she was actually down in round 1. Suarez had the takedown. I was like, oh, wow, this could be, because Suarez had been mowing through people. She had been dominating people. And I thought maybe, Weili had, of course, she's lost to Rose twice, even though the second Rose fight, I thought she had won. I thought that was a bad decision. So it can be vulnerable. It's not like she's undefeated, but then she rallied and really just dominated. Right. It was a very impressive decision here. There's talks now of she's one of the greatest women fighters ever, of course, but there's talks of her maybe going up to flyweight at 125 and fighting Valentina. I don't like it. I think she's too small. I think the better fight is convincing Rose to come back down to 115 one last time, because I don't see Rose being a champ at flyweight. She's just not big enough to deal with those hulking girls like Ferro and and Shevchenko. And I think you got to book Weili, Namajunas 3 and see if Weili can finally get those 2 losses off her back. That's the one thing that I like to bring up there.
I like your assessment. Nothing to add, but I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so that's all we're going to talk about there because we need to move on. Let's get to the card that just happened Saturday night.
Yeah.
And listen, the funny thing was we'll talk about our issues of Dana's light cards, which is going to become a theme. We're probably not going to get it today, but in our next show, we're going to talk a lot about Dana kind of throwing up cards that we don't think maybe are chock full of ranked guys.
Yeah.
One thing I will say just for the fans, and I did the math here, Niko. There's 11 weight classes. You times 11 by 15, and I believe you get 165. Okay? So that means there's 165 ranked fighters. That means that Dana needs to give us more than fucking 2 on a card. Okay, Absolutely. So anyway, we'll come back to that. It'll be a theme.
The first top 3 fights should be all ranked opponents.
Top 3 fights have to be ranked opponents. I mean, come on. At least you got the top 2, so we'll take it. So
yeah, we'll take
really quickly, let's flip it. Let's talk about Zalal Kattar first. I'll go, and then I'll get your feelings about Kattar. Okay, so what was so there's 2 storylines. One is Kattar sliding. He's lost 3 straight. Very shocking because he had beaten Giga. He looked like he had been one of the best hands in the division, even though he got roughed up by Holloway. That kind of deflated him a little bit, but I really thought that I had high hopes for him for the future. He's got the East Coast tough guy boxing. And then in comes Yusuf Zalal. I wasn't that familiar with him. I got to get my shit in gear because this guy came in. He was a heavy favorite. As you guys can see, he was a minus 470. And I thought, like, okay, he's going to try to grapple Kattar. And boom, this guy outstrikes him for 2 straight rounds. It was unbelievable. He was super fast. I mean, it was like he was outstriking the legitimate premier boxer. I just couldn't fucking believe it. Kattar rallies a little bit in the third round, but it wasn't enough, and he pretty much loses either all 3 rounds or at least 2 of them. And now Zalal is number 10 in the world. That's a big storyline. We always love when a new guy comes in and brings fresh blood to the division. What are your thoughts
Honestly,
here
my
on the
thoughts
Kattar
are just,
situation?
I'll hone in on the sort of decline of Kattar, because versus Chikazde, that fight, I think,
Oh my God.
he reached sort of like the max of his potential. He just needed to keep that level going. And we really thought with his East Coast style boxing that he can do damage within the division. And then he's fallen since then. And this was just the next natural fight where we just saw this decline, where he just didn't quite have enough, couldn't quite match Zalal on the feet. And so not necessarily surprising, because that trend was already in motion, but disappointing because you saw the potential of what he could do against elite striking.
Yeah, and then now, just like, since we have the ability, I love that, like, I can just pull up the fight history for you. Let's just look at what happened, because see, okay, so this is what happened. He gets destroyed by Holloway, but he stays in it. He comes back and he resets his career in an unbelievable way against Giga. We lost our mind. And then sadly, he then loses to Emmett in a close fight. Allen knocks him out because Allen's a rising star. Sterling grapples him, and now Zalal, and now it's 4 straight. It's like, man, that's such a bummer, because
it is.
After he beat Giga, he was like number 5 in the world, and now we're thinking about his career, and the UFC is over. I'm bummed, because I really liked the guy. I had high hopes. Let's go back to that card here. I love that we have the ability to look this up live. I think nothing makes you happier than doing what we just did. Okay.
Absolutely. So here we are.
Now the big fight. I'll take this. Then I'll punt it over to you. Listen, I had actually been kind of like, Cannonier's done. He'd lost 2 straight. Yes, they were close, but he loses to a Mavov. Right?
Yeah,
he loses to Bahalyo in that last one. So it goes a Mavov, then Bahalyo, and after that one, it was like, oh, okay. He's 41 or something like that. Like, I think he has the power, but it looked like, his day was getting close to being the end, right? So in comes RoboCop. This guy, he had been on a huge winning streak. He'd only lost 1 to another Brazilian, Fajea, that we need to start talking more about. But it looked like, this guy came into the ring. He was a big, huge, hulking middleweight. I was kind of shocked at the size of him dwarfing Cannonier like that, because Cannonier is usually the bigger guy. He's not super tall, but he's jacked, right? And so round 1, Rodriguez has him hurt. He's knocks him down twice, it looks like, but Cannonier still stays alive. He rallies in the second round for a very close round. Rodriguez looks like he punched himself out a little bit in that first round, and then by round 3, Rodriguez comes back, and it looks like, okay, Cannonier's done. It looks like he was resetting himself, and then Cannonier lands the big elbow. He almost finishes him, and then he finishes him round 4. I gotta say, what a performance. Cannonier's still around. This is the fight of the year so far, and I know it's early in 2025. It's easy to say that, but what a performance. He stays now, in my eyes, in contention. He might not get a title shot again because he's at a number 7, but he should get a top 5 fight again. I think one last hurrah. Dana has to put him up. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are, the word that comes to mind for Jared Cannonier is resiliency. What he was able to show and weather that first round storm that Rodriguez rained on him, essentially, in that first round. And for him to be able to keep his composure, work through his cardio, stay tough, and get that win, resiliency. And he's proven that time and time again. He's a consummate professional. He's top notch. Now, I went into this fight thinking Rodriguez would do exactly what we saw him do in the first round, because what was the last fight that Rodriguez fought? I'm forgetting who he fought that I witnessed, and I said to myself, this guy is dangerous.
Yeah, I'll click on Rodriguez for you right here, because now we can do that live. Yeah, so against Duncan,
against
Brit.
Duncan, which he just absolutely mauled. He comes into the first round with Cannonier and dominates him. He literally, it could have been called. The fight was close to being called at that point. It was very, very close to being called.
Yeah, it was
knocked
close.
down the one time. The other time he got maybe tripped a little bit, but it was close. And Rodriguez, it just shows you, like you said, Ari, he punched himself out of that round. It's not just you got to think throughout. You got to think the full fight. You can't. And that's the beauty of the sport, right? You see the turnaround that Jared was able to pull off. He turned that fight around by sheer will. So great for him. Good props. Like you said, it's probably going to give him one more sort of, maybe top 5 fight.
Yeah.
As his sort of final hurrah. Let's see.
Okay, so let's move on from this card because we still got a lot of this show. We got some big topics here. And so now what we're going to talk about, MMA news, right? Well, there's only just one bit of news that I do want to cover here.
Okay.
Each show, we're going to bring up, some crazy thing. And the big news that I want to talk about, and it goes hand in hand with our feelings on the sport in general. And, we're sick of being in the fucking apex. Let's just get this straight. Yeah. I don't like... what's funny in the last one? It actually didn't bother me as much because they have some fans yelling.
Some fans were
but I want a big fucking crowd. Yeah, I don't like this small auditorium. It worked during the pandemic, but dude, it's 2025, Dana. And Dana even said last year, hey, I'm going to start going out to more venues, forget the Apex. However, I think it's just really easy to put the fights on. It's in his backyard. It's right there. People are used to it. So I looked up the article since we last talked, Niko. Dana in late December claims this, and I'll read it word for word. We're doing a $20 million expansion here. We're going to invest a lot of money in the place. We got some pretty big announcements coming in the next 6 months. So it'll all sort of make sense on what we're doing and why we're doing it. What I like about that is now they can build a bigger, they can get the fans just right there. It's a good home base because
it's a good home base.
Because they almost have a weekly card. So they need a place where Dana can just easily plan them. And when you're in Seattle and then fucking Miami and Chicago, all over the place, it's just harder to plan. So much more investment and you're relying on all these other stadiums. So I like this. What are your feelings on that?
That's exactly what you said. I mean, when you watch a fight there and there's a sporadic crowd, there's this echo. It feels like it's boomy. Like sonically, the experience is just bizarre. There's this eerie quietness, and it's just not. It's not what you're accustomed seeing from the UFC. It just doesn't have that energy. So the idea that they're going to build around it, because for all the reasons you said, it makes sense to have a home base, and they could build around what they already have and build up. I think it'll be perfect. I think it'll be just what the UFC needs, and it'll also serve as that sort of like consistent, booking that you can make, or that consistent setting that you can get fights booked in. So I'm happy with the idea. They're putting the idea to practice. It's good stuff.
Yeah, the other thing that they better clean up, we talked about this before, is that I've read, I didn't know this initially, the ring, the octagon in the fucking Apex is smaller than the standard, and I don't like that because to me it's like the fighter should always be aware of their the perimeter. And so to me, this gives advantage to grapplers because you can get the strikers they don't have less real estate to run around and get away. But to your point recently, though, too, they also have the ability to get their backs on the cage more quickly. So I guess if they do get taken down, then in the Apex, they can get. I just think it's like, yes, in baseball, there's different auditorium or different. It
kills the consistency of the sport. I don't like this.
I don't like
suddenly
that,
there's this. It's a different dynamic.
Yes, there should be one perfect size.
And we gotta stick to it. And
so
I think that's where we are.
I hope that Dana, when he builds this out and there's more space, also addresses that, because that would be
nice.
That would be unjust.
Maybe he might be listening. We don't know.
Yeah. So okay, we're gonna say there's a lot of other news topics that we're gonna hit on throughout, but we're gonna save them for the next episode. And so with that, let's take another quick break from our sponsors. Okay, baby, we're back. We're back to the show. We're feeling good. Let's get into the state of the MMA world topics. We got 2 hot topics here today. Okay, the first one, and I know you have a lot to say on this, is and I'll, before I go into the different possibilities, would you agree an improvement needs to be made with the state of MMA scoring?
I think so. I think that's an obvious. Anyone who's been watching has a feeling that something needs to change there. There needs to be an evolution to the scoring. It's not quite right now.
Yeah.
Talk to us, Ari, your thoughts on what's up, and what there's also a new idea that's been kind of bubbling up the
So this
surface.
is the one that I like the most, is the half-point scoring system. So let's backtrack here for the fans, right? And people that know fighting and for the, know this already. The scoring was implemented from boxing. It's a 10-9 scoring system. If you win the round, you get a 10. If you lose a round, you get a 9. Then so MMA adopted that. It just, I don't know if it totally works. And then if you ever have a really dominating, so now let's say on the MMA side, if you have a very dominating round, it becomes a 10-8. Okay. And then there's even 10-7s, but that's like, you never see a 10-7. So usually is 10-9. But the issue is this. Okay. The issue is that really close rounds are judged the same as very decisive rounds. It's unfair because let's say you barely edge something out, almost nothing happens, and you get 2 little leg kicks. And they're like, oh, okay, cool, damage. We're going to give that guy the round. And then the next round, the other guy decisively gets like 50 shots into your 30. He still only gets the 10-9.
Right, because you only get the 10-8 if it was an absolute mauling.
Almost you finish him. He's knocked down multiple times. Like the guy needs to be almost stopped to get a 10-8. But you can still have
a decisive victory, and it's scored just
still
like as
just
a little
10-9.
Yeah, 10-9.
Right? So what the proposal is this, that the half-point system would be, okay, let's say it's a razor thin round. The winner would get the 10, the loser gets a 9.5. So it doesn't count as much. So let's say if you get 2 of those in a row and you're just holding the guy down, which is which you don't like, and it's just like, and you're just barely just winning the rounds, you're only up a point. So then that guy has the ability to flip it. Okay.
In one round in the last round. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. But the issue is, we talked about this. The issue is that it might incur more draws might happen because of it. Okay. Yes. So let's say you eke out rounds 1, you eke out round 2, and then the other guy flips it and he has a decisive 3rd round comeback. That's a draw, right? And so I know. Let me get your thoughts on this. I know that you say you like the draws, and then I'll come back and tell you why they're the danger to too many draws.
Here's the thing. Well, first, I don't mind seeing more draws in this sport because often I have sat at the end of a fight and said to myself, and announcers have said this, and it's the common sort of, how do you judge that fight? They fought so even. Well, if they fought even, I want the score to actually reflect that. I want an accuracy in the judging. I don't want to have to pick for the sake of getting a win versus not having the draw. I want the accurate conclusion to the fight. If they fought to a standstill, they fought to a standstill that night. Okay? Yeah. Sorry, fans. We're not going to get a win. All right? You're not going to get a win. It's going to be a draw. That's what it is. But that's one. Now, I will say, Ari.
Yes.
Take a step back. You mentioned that the scoring came from boxing and it was adopted into MMA. Well, MMA is so different. Boxing is a one-dimensional sport, okay? I'm not going to knock boxing, but it's one thing you can tell who won or who lost. It's just striking, right? It's just one-dimensional. Yeah. With MMA, it's so much more well-rounded. There's so many other components that the scoring has to reflect some type of nuance. So I do like your idea of a half-point scoring. I do like that.
Okay.
Now, tell me why you think it's a problem to end up with draws. Is that because of the bonus? I think you're going to say.
There's a couple issues, and maybe you're right. Maybe splitting the purses a different way, but there's you get a lot of win bonuses in the UFC. You get money to show and money to win. So if all these draws happen, you don't get your win bonus, and then especially if you're not one of the top tier fighters and you've traveled there with your whole camp, no one gets that additional money. Yeah. So they would need to work out a better system where there isn't a win bonus if that were to, or some way that you can split an additional bonus. The other thing is, the one that resonates more with you is it'll stall the divisions, because you were already pissed about things not taking about 6 months to be booked. And you're like, what the fuck, Dana, right? Imagine if all these draws start happening and nothing is decided and the rankings stay the same and they got to rebook it or book somebody else and there isn't enough movement. The draws, I think, are going to end up giving you more headache than maybe.
Fair point. I get that. One thing I will say about the scoring, though, and then you probably have the answer to this, is like a little bit of the transparency of the scoring. I know there's a general concept to it. Starts with, you do damage goes first, and then it's control time, that there's a hierarchy to the
Yeah.
scoring, but do we really see that in practice? Are judges really implementing that hierarchy? Do we really know what drew them to score around this way or that way? There's a lack of transparency and unknown. It's very qualitative in nature.
Yeah.
And that gets tricky. It gets tricky. It gets frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good point. So it's like, yeah, I mean, the one other thing that I'll say to that is, just like baseball, the umpire. Remember, we talked about this. Like, hey, they might be. There's sometimes they say, oh, he's calling it a little outside today, or there's a little bit of the innuendo of the strike zone, and then in NBA in the playoffs, well, it's the playoffs. They're not going to make that call. So sometimes you have some refs that are just a little bit more grapple heavy, and when they sometimes you have refs that are a little bit more, into the striking and that kind of thing, right? So yes, but it does overall. They should be following a specific assessment to damage is always the king. But if it's just a little bit of a damage and you control the guy for the entire rest of the round, you're going to side that way. And you will have some judges that are biased a little bit more to the grappling side or to the striking side. But I think 80% of the time people are getting it right.
And
there's
that's
the 20%
I'm not poo-pooing the entire system here. I'm not trying to bring it all down. But we have thoughts. We got to share.
The other scenario here that we talked about is live scoring option, right? So there's other train of thought, right, that basically says that why not have live scoring so that people at home and everybody knows what's going on, and then the fans at home would also love, because some people, like you said, are confused. They're like who's up? It's always this well, you don't know
nebulous,
until the end,
vague thing,
and so there is this thought that, you could have live scoring. But here's the issue is that the fighters, if they find out, then it would ruin it, because let's say you were up 2 rounds, you're just going to run on the third. And then if you're up, 3 rounds or 4 rounds in a 5-round fight, you're just going to run around, so there is,
it works in soccer. It works in basketball. It works in football.
What do you mean? You mean that they're up yet?
Yeah, that happens. That's part of the game when there's time component to the game. So you could argue that, but it would really kind of suck. I'm not a big fan of it. I just want to know, at least on the back end, I want to know what went into the scoring and have an understanding, because there's always a questions and uncertainty around it, So that's where I'm at on that.
Okay, so I'm with you. I don't think that can happen. I like the half-point scoring system, but maybe they need to test it in a different organization, or just test it maybe on Dana White Contender Series or something like that.
Get a little feel for it.
See if there's too many draws that are occurring. See how it actually plays out. That, especially in the 5-round fights, it would really work. In the 3, you might have the trouble. Then the final thing that we can talk about is ref accountability. So maybe if we knew why they're scoring, they have to come up in the press conference, so they have to write an article, they have to do something at the end that kind of shows you why they made the call that they did. Paul Felder, a fighter, talked recently about it, where he talked to some of the judges afterwards, and then he got their perspective, like, oh, okay, I guess I could see that. So maybe that would help us understand, okay, I judged this damage, I judged this takedown, that's why I gave that guy the round, when it's a close one. If it's atrocious, there's nothing you can say. But anyway, do you like that idea?
Love that idea. Simple. We need to have that transparency component that I mentioned in the beginning. So what you're referring to, for me, satisfies that need to just have, they got to come out and they got to explain the rationale for the scoring, what was behind it. And it's as simple as that. Keeps the sport honest. Keeps us all sort of, okay, there was a point of view on this. Refs do that all the time in NBA, right? They have to come out. Sometimes they even come post-fight and explain there was actually 2 fouls we didn't call, etc. That's even happening now. But, I feel like it should just be a part of the final sort of, even when they raise someone's hand and we immediately know this is why that judgment came the way it did.
So the next topic, and this is one of my most exciting topics that I don't know if we're talking about on every show, but we are going to address this quite a bit, is the count of current champions. And I'm going to show you something in 1 second. There's 2 people from the United States, 2 from Brazil, 1 from Palestine. And of course, you could argue, hey, he's US born, but whatever we want. He wants to probably pay tribute to his family and to where he's from.
His
1
heritage,
in Russia. Yeah, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Kyrgyzstan, 1 in Spain, 1 in South Africa, 1 in China, and 1 in the UK. Now, let me do this. Okay, so let's just pull up. If you go here, I love that you can go on rankings. And then, like, so again, Pantoja's from Brazil, Marab's from Georgia, Toporia's from Spain, Makachev, Russia, Bilal, Palestine, Duplessis, South Africa, Pereira, the other guy from Brazil,
Absolutely.
Jones, US, Shevchenko, Kyrgyzstan, Zhang Weili, China, and then, of course, Pena, the other women's champ, also from the US. So I just like not every show we're probably going to cover this, but just once a month, let's look at this. Let's see how things are shifting, what parts of the world are dominating. And this used to be all US and Brazil. And now, what are your thoughts? I just love how international
I know
become.
it's just we've seen that evolution of the sport. We've seen the growth, right, globally, and we see that we now have representation from across the globe in terms of championships, and it's great for the sport. It's great for the for where the sport's heading. That we can do cards in places you would never have imagined, and you have that draw. So absolutely good for the sport. Love to see sort of that diversity of at the top. And it's really a testament to how the sport has grown and how it's evolved, right? Used to be just dominated by the US and Brazil, but now we're really in a global arena here.
Yeah, so I love looking at this, right? So that's our other big, MMA theme of state of the MMA world. Let's always go back to that, right? So Niko, for our next segment, and maybe your favorite fucking segment, baby, is the divisional analysis. And this week, we're going to hit heavyweight hard. Each show, just so the audience knows, we're going to hit a different division and go deep on it.
I see it.
All right, so
Top 15.
I'll give a quick rundown and then I'll let you go, okay? So the big things here, right, is that you got Jones, you got Aspinall. This is the fucking big question that everybody wants answered. They got to do this fight. I mean, come on, man. So probably what's going to happen is it's going to be all the way June 28th, International Fight Week. They always pick a big card. I know you don't like this because you have to wait fucking 7 months, but I'll hold on to your thoughts in a second. Let me run down the rest here. That's the fight they have to make. If not, Jones retires, and then maybe they do Aspinall Gane. Gane, however, in my eyes, he's the number 2 people. I know people driving in their car can't see. So what we're doing is we're looking at the top 15. Jones at number 1, Aspinall, the top contender, Cyril Gane, the number 2. This is what happened. Gane got a lucky decision in my eyes against Volkov. He lost that fight, baby. Okay. Now, I think Volkov did enough, although your boy rallied. And I feel bad now that Gane is going to be the contender right after the Jones Aspinall. But anyway, Pavlovich at number 4 also reset himself against Rosenstruck recently, causing them to drop Jairzinho. Blades had that great win against Almeida, but then, of course, he lost to Aspinall, although I thought it was a little bit of a premature stoppage. I think he's still in the hunt. I know you don't really believe in Blades as well. And then you have Almeida, who came back. He was down. Spivak looked like he was out-grappling him, and then he weathered the storm with the grappling, started out-grappling him, and then actually landed punches, which made you think, wow, this guy is evolving.
Yes.
The rest of that middle of the pack, it's like, Spivak, he's very impressive as a grappler, but as a stand-up, he can't hang. I mean, he got destroyed when he was in there with Gane. Tybura is just up and down. I think his run is over with. Rosenstruck just got dropped. Vasa's on a huge slide. Then you got some guys in the top 15, but really nobody that's totally catching my eyes. But Gaziev at 11, Waldo Acosta at 12, Mick Parkin at 13. He's the one guy I'm looking for.
I agree.
And I almost missed this because we were talking about this recently, Niko. Tybura Parkin is actually booked.
Wow.
On the card.
I like it.
Yeah, that's a clean fight because it gets Parkin a shot at that middle of the pack.
And move closer. Exactly.
Right? And that's on the Jack Madalena fight versus Edwards card.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Other than that, no one's booked except Blades, and he's going up against Cunez, who's fucking not even in the top 15. So anyway, that's my thought on it. It's the last thing I'll say, Niko. Heavyweight used to always be a top of the echelon class. The original champions were always the heavyweight champions. Couture was a heavyweight and a light heavyweight champion. Okay, there's been a lot of great heavyweight champions. I don't think it has the same iconic feeling overall as 205, because that's where Ortiz was, and Liddell, and then Couture, and that was always like maybe the highest echelon of divisions, but heavyweight is the last thing I'll say, and I'll let you take over, is the baddest man on the planet is the heavyweight champion. Okay, go ahead, Niko.
All right. Middle of the pack, so you're 7 through 10, from Spivak to Tuivasa. All of those are at this point, they're not going to be champions. That's pretty clear. They're not going to be champions. You just have a Parkin in there in the 11 through 15. That might have, or, the Waldo Cortez Acosta maybe has a shot to sort of spring forward. And I like the booking with Parkin with versus Tybura, just to give Parkin that opportunity to maybe make some noise and move closer. I think the sleeper of the division, the one that I think that has that ability to surge and actually be champion, is our number 6 Almeida. He's the one has shown an absolute on the ground and uncanny grappling, but then he's improved on his striking. So he's dangerous. He's, a little bit, I think he's a little younger too, right? So he's got what I think it takes to actually move into that top 5, easily in the top 5, but potentially a championship contention. Yeah, the Jones Aspinall saga has been way too drawn out. We don't like it for the sport. I don't like that Tom Aspinall's finishing fighters in less than a minute, and he's sitting there going without a fight for how long, waiting around for this little Jones show to happen. Love John Jones. It's a big challenge for John Jones to take the fight versus Aspinall, but we need to see it happen for the sake of the sport. Very important. And if it's not going to happen, stop the games. Let's move on, okay?
Yeah, I'm with you. So, go ahead.
And then listen. For me, Gane versus Volkov, very close fight. I'm a little biased because I love Gane. I followed his trajectory. I just love his striking. So I'm glad he's still in the mix and he's right there. Volkov has shown just unbelievable history. This guy's fought, like, look at his record. I mean, how many fights is this guy? He's the consummate, UFC, fighter.
And a huge run he's been on, beating Pavlovich and maybe beating Gane.
Yeah, and we love our Volkov as well. And then Pavlovich, who went on that downward, he had such promise. He was surging, and then he just got knocked down a couple pegs.
Aspinall,
now he reset himself. Reset himself. He's back in contention, always dangerous. So we basically have a top-heavy excitement on the top side of the division. So in that early 1 through 6 is where we have the animation within the division.
Yeah.
We love how it's unfolding, but let's get that Jones-Aspinall booked. June already sounds like forever to me. Sounds like unnecessarily dragged out. So hope we see that. We see that sort of chips fall into place after that booking.
Yeah, I think Jones loves just, he's asking for tons of monies, and he realizes Aspinall is going to be his toughest fight. Does he want to mess with his legacy of being the greatest fighter of all time and actually ending with a loss or something like that? And I know you talked about it recently. If he actually loses that fight, I don't know if he then leaves. Maybe his ego brings him to fight Pereira, because Pereira, here's the other last thing that we'll say, and then we'll move on to the picks and the final segment of the show, is Pereira wants to go to heavyweight. So don't forget that might also occur in 2025. If he beats Ankalaev, he's said that, hey, he's big enough. He has the frame to go to heavy. Imagine if that then happens.
That'll be wild.
That then ignites what I think is heavyweight is starting to it's been kind of falling a little bit in, I think, the excitement.
And Ari, who do you think wins the Aspinall Jones fight? Just give us your take real quick.
That's the hardest one I've ever. Probably because it's like you want to say Aspinall, but then it's John Jones. I've doubted him his whole career, and I've always said, well, this guy's finally going to beat him, and this guy's finally going to beat him, and then it never happens.
Give me Aspinall. Give me Aspinall. Okay.
Yeah, very possible. All right. So anyway, I hope you guys like that. That's our divisional analysis here. So let's go back the final section of this show, okay, so and let's actually just, really quickly do one more break from our sponsor, baby. Okay, and we're back to the show for one final section. This is going to be magnificent. What we're now going to go over is what we do every show, where we discuss the next two big cards and we make our world famous Savvy picks. Okay,
Great.
So we're going to talk about Cejudo versus Song Yadong, and then Kopp versus Amabayev. Okay,
Bring it up.
And then we're going to end. Yeah, we're going to bring it up. Let's get to the events, baby. Oh, and this is the greatest thing. This was not updated, and as of last night, it's almost fully updated. And we're going to have our picks live, right?
All right, good.
So let's run through this. We got Cejudo versus Song Yadong. It's actually, to me, for a fight night, this is a great card. We lost a couple fights on this. There was supposed to be chock full of better fights, but still it's really good, especially the final two fights. Let's start with Cejudo versus Song Yadong. I'll go, then I'll let you give your analysis, and we'll do our quick picks, okay? So Cejudo, we all know, is an ex-flyweight champion, ex-bantamweight champion, that he retired really young. He's come back, and he's lost two really close fights to Sterling and to Merab. But you can't shame him because there were some of the best guys in the world, and he just got out grappled shockingly because he was the Olympic gold medalist for wrestling. He's number 7 in the world. Song Yadong, number 8 in the world. He's a rising star. He was much younger. He was on a run, but he did lose in a close battle to Yan. As you can see, he's the minus 285 favorite here. So I'm just going to say it here live, Niko, even though I'm worried about this pick. I take Yadong, baby, and that's Savvy's first official pick in 13 years. Okay, guys?
Well, just to burst your bubble, I take Song Yadong as well. I do think Henry Cejudo has shown his championship pedigree and caliber in the last two fights, even though he's lost them. I just don't think he's going to be able to get the victory. He will make it competitive, but Yadong's youth, his striking ability, he's going to win those rounds. He's going to get more rounds under his belt, give him the W overall. So I go with you on that one, Ari. Song Yadong gets the W.
Okay, I like he's probably maybe he outstrikes him. I just worried about the wrestling. Cejudo realizes he says this is my last run. He realizes that if he loses this one, his career's over. Maybe he rallies enough to beat the younger. I don't know. So it's to me, I don't think it should be almost a minus 300. I think this is much closer than people are saying. But anyway,
fair.
Yeah. So, and we might come back to this with our if you were to touch. Just remember that.
Yeah.
Now, Brendan Allen at number 9 at middleweight versus Anthony Hernandez, number 12 at middleweight. This to
Fight
me,
of the night.
Fight of the night. You agree? I'll go first, and then I'll let you jump in.
Yes.
Brendan Allen's our boy. We're watching this rising star. He's a great grappler, especially with jiu-jitsu, but his hands have improved. He went on that monumental run, and then he lost that close fight to Amava, but he was in the fight.
Yes.
So I don't think it's really fully derailed him. It may just gave him a little bit of a pause. And with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, he's just this grappling superstar. Okay, so he, besides Bo Nickel, who everybody says has got the greatest wrestling, we'll see, even though I didn't like his last fight, and Kamayev, he might be the best grappler in the entire middleweight division, which we know is maybe the most exciting division in all of the UFC now.
Yeah.
So this is a very monumental, instrumental fight here.
Right.
Just so you know, the fight odds, they have been updated, and I'll show you live because I am on FanDuel, baby. Right now, Anthony Hernandez is a minus 295. Brendan Allen's plus 220. I can't believe it. I think this should be closer, but Hernandez did beat him in the original matchup, and I think what they're saying in Vegas is that Hernandez is going to wrestle him. So I'm going to go against you here. I'm going to go against your boy, Niko. I'm taking Hernandez, and it's not just because I'm taking the favorites, but because his wrestling is so good. I'm not going to take someone else until someone shows me, proves that they can stop, they can stuff the takedown, they can deal with the pressure. And I feel like Brendan Allen might be that guy, but I need to see it. What's your thoughts here?
I'm taking Brendan Allen on this one. I'm officially that's a W for him. I do think his last outing and his loss, he did fight very well. He works through some of the kinks. and I think he will, to be prepared for this fight. He's also already fought Anthony Hernandez, like you said. I think he will get a tough victory.
Wow.
And I'm going with Brandon Allen there. I think he's formidable as a grappler to match Hernandez there. He might even have better striking than Hernandez, from what I've understood.
Yeah, he's going to be better on the feet, but that's if they stay on the feet. That's the big question mark.
But
right?
I think he's considered one of the best grapplers as well. He's top.
Yes.
He's top notch. He's the more balanced fighter. I like him.
Okay. So the next one we barely even analyze. I mean, Silva, he beat your boy Dober up at lightweight. He's a featherweight guy. He's fighting Melsik Bogzadarian. But I mean, look at this. It's ballooned up to minus 575. I don't even think we need to go that deep into it because sadly we're swayed.
Yeah,
we're both taking Silva. Are you taking Silva? I'm taking Silva here, Niko.
It's official. Yep.
Silva, all right. So now we have two of the same picks. One, and now I love this. Since yesterday, we were just analyzing this yesterday. They've updated the UFC website. It takes forever. I don't like how they do that. Number 9, Rob Font versus newcomer stepping in on short notice because of the injured Dominic Cruz, Jean Matsumoto. Okay, he's favored. I believe it's a minus 175. So they're saying this. He's 16-0. But you know what I'm gonna do? Since you went with a gut pick and you went with an underdog, I'm going to stay with my boy Font because he saved his career by beating Kyler Phillips. I think Matsumoto's coming up on short notice, and he's going up too far in class. We talk about this. What happens when sometimes they push the new guy a little too early? This is the number 9 guy in the world you're dealing with, who's a great striker. I think he goes in there and maybe Font gets maybe another big win in his career. I'm worried about it, but I'm taking Font. What do you say?
I'm taking the opposite. Matsumoto. And it's a little bit of a combination of Rob Font has disappointed me. I think he has so much promise. He usually starts fights very well. He seems to sort of have a lot of potential, and then it's always about promise, but then he doesn't really deliver and seal the deal. And you have Matsumoto here, hungrier, coming in. I think he'll overpower Rob Font, and I'm going with the favorite there.
And then the big news since yesterday, your boy Cutelaba, the Hulk Cutelaba, has been promoted to the main card. Therefore, we have to cover it against newcomer Ibo Aslan from Turkey.
Oh,
but so
man.
Check this out. And I did this research last night because you haven't really had tons of time. Aslan's come in and he's got 2 KO victories in a row. Okay, so be a little bit careful. Although Cutelaba, if we do, I love how we can just look at this up on the fly. Cutelaba he had lost to Lins, but then he reset himself in a hard-fought decision against Erslan. So they're both coming off wins.
Yeah, I remember
you can
that
see
fight.
Aslan is this slight favorite. So I'm going to be shame here. Cutelaba is too reckless. He's so up and down. I like this new guy coming in, even though maybe he's going up a little bit in class because Cutelaba's fought all these top guys. I'm taking Aslan. That's my pick, baby. How do you fare?
Not happy about it, but I'm gonna go with Aslan too to get the victory there.
Wow. Okay. I thought you wanted Cutelaba. I'm a bit disappointed.
I like Cutelaba, but I just don't have a lot of faith there.
Yeah.
And this guy's hot. This Aslan seems like he's coming in very hot. So
right.
I'm just not sure. Cutelaba's a little bit hit or miss. So
yes, and then the final one. He's coming off 2 losses, but he always is in the fight. He's a super, strong guy, great striker, Alonzo Menafield. He's still number 15 in the world. So at least we're getting another ranking in against newcomer. His first fight in the UFC. They don't even have his fucking picture up. He's so new. Julius Walker. And we're just got to go with the heart pick. I got to take Menafield. He's favored.
I'm taking Menafield.
Let me just double check the odds. I know that one is here. Menafield is minus 192, as you can see straight on there. So we're just gonna be lame here. I barely know Walker. I think he's also maybe stepping up in class. He's going against the number 15 guy in the world. I think Menafield does it for us. You're in agreement?
Yeah, I think he hangs on and he keeps his ranking.
Okay.
I don't think Menafield's ready to give that up. Yep.
This is in Seattle, Saturday night, 6 p.m. my time, 9 p.m. your time. It's a nice later card so you can actually catch them so you don't get
I love it.
barneyed with the day plans. Okay,
Yep.
final card. As we said, we always go 2 weeks back. We always go 2 weeks forward. Kopp versus Almabayev. Now, listen, yesterday we were talking about this, and it didn't really look like a great card. And on paper, it's not. And you know, next
sometimes
show,
those cards that don't look good on paper end up being the best cards. So that's why we
Right.
tune in. That's why we watch, because sometimes you're surprised. You see some of these lesser known fighters show you something that you've never seen before, and they suddenly, show up. So we need to pay attention.
Yes, and so what I wanted to show you, because I've done some analysis since we last talked here.
Okay.
And so the main fight is supposed to be Kopp Royval. So it wasn't really Dana's fault, because that was a really big fight, because Kopp is coming off amazing victory that I really thought put the entire division. It got me more excited about the flyweight division, the way that he disposed of Silva. It was a great, great fight. Almabayev has stepped in on short notice. He's also a rising star. He's number 8 in the world, where Kopp is number 6. Okay, so Kopp is a minus 265, as you can all see from this betting website, right? So I'm going to just, yes, Almabayev, he's on a good run, but he's coming in on short notice. I think Kopp looked so unstoppable in that last fight that Kopp from Angola, I love the international thing, I'm taking him. How do you see this main fight going?
I'm with Kopp. I love the way he fights, and what he's shown me is been so solid and exciting. And it's a short notice fight for Azu.
Yeah.
So I'm going with Kopp.
Okay. Now we're just going to look at this a little bit more deeply, and I might be switching my pick on you, Niko. We had talked about this. I wanted Brundage, okay? But then I quickly looked at his fight history. As you can see, Brundage really has so listen, he had come off a couple losses. He got the win against Malkoun, but it was a DQ. He beats Reese. He gets submitted by Nickel, and then just could not continue against Al Hassan. I don't know if I trust this guy. So now if you look at, I love that we can do this on the fly. If you look at Marquez, he also has really been up and down over the last couple fights, right? So look, he look at this.
My boy RoboCop.
So he beats Alvi, he beats Patolo, but then he loses to RoboCop. He gets knocked out. He then comes back and beats Barrio, who we both know, but then only to come back and get knocked out. God damn it! So I'm so, you know what? All right. I'm so torn by this one, so I'm going to stay with my initial gut. I'm taking Brundage, baby, even though they're both very up and down. I don't know how this is a co-main event, Dana, but I guess I'm just going to stick with Brundage because that was my heart pick.
I'm hoping Brundage is a bit more of the scrappier fighter and just pulls off and ekes out a victory here, right? And that's why I'm sticking with Cody Brundage on this.
Okay, so we both have Brundage.
We don't have a controversy. We both have Brundage, yes.
Now, this one is actually an amazing fight. Look at what Hopcross has done. He's now won. So he lost to your boy King Green, Bobby Green, and then he's beaten Makdessi, Quiones, Malarkey, and Gordon all in a row. He's won 4 straight fights. This guy's maybe a rising star, okay? But then you look at Ribovics, okay? Look at his history. This guy also now he lost his first fight, but sometimes that happens with with the stress of your first UFC fight. And now he's beaten Kirk. He's beaten McKinney, who is great by knockout, and he beats Zellhuber. Actually, I watched that. It was a very close fight. He's also, just so you know, Ribovics is minus 250, so I'm going to get swayed by Vegas here, guys, even though Hopcross has won 4 straight. Ribovics has won 3. What do you do? I'm very torn on this, but I'm going to get swayed by Vegas. I'm taking Ribovics, baby. What do you say?
I'm Ribovics. Sorry to not, there's no controversy here. I'm going to stick with Ribovics.
You like that?
Yeah, I feel like the Nasrat is to get the victory has to overcome a lot. He's got to really shine. Is it possible? Yes, but I'm going to go with the safer pick here.
Okay, all right. That's going to be a close one. To me, that should have been the co-main. I don't know how that's not the co-main with their status. Now, this is the interesting one that we looked at yesterday. Austin Lane versus Mario Pinto. Now, we did look this up. you liked Lane when we were talking. He just even though he lost to Denise, he beat Despain, who is that highly talented newcomer. So, but I don't think I can do it because I'm getting, if you look at it, Pinto is a minus 350. Vegas knows something that I don't. I mean, if you look at Pinto, he's only 1-0. God,
Where is he from?
I'm torn. He's Portuguese.
Portuguese,
but
wow.
I'm going to get swayed by Vegas. I'm going to be shamed. Yes, Richie Folgoni. I know you're thinking Wally is sleaze right now by taking all the favorites, but I got to protect my picks. I'm taking Pinto, baby.
Well, listen,
Who do you say?
I'm going Lane. I am going against the grain on this one. It's, this is a heavyweight bout. One punch can make the difference. I think Lane can do that and just, just shut the crowd down with one punch. So I'm taking the underdog here.
Wow, that's big. And then for the final fight, and then we'll wrap it up here, is Gomes, a Frenchman who's been on a tear, versus Emil. And just so you can also see the quick analysis here, Niko, this guy has now also, look at this, he's won 4 straight. So he's a very serious guy. So anyway, the reason why I'm showing everybody this is because it looks on paper like it's not a great card, but there's definitely some up and comers, guys on big win streaks. Yeah. And then if you look at Emil, you look at Emil, and he's now won his first 2 by knockout. So this is actually really freaky because you look at this. Gomez is a minus 170. So, but this guy, look, he's coming in the hurricane.
And he looks like a beast.
He looks like a beast from the Philippines. I'm going to, again, no, you know what? I'm going to stick with it. My original thought was Gomez. I'm going to stay with the favorites on this one just because that's what I got to do here. Sadly, I got to be shameful. Gomez, I'm taking him. How do you feel, my good sir?
I'm going to go with Gomez here. Okay, the Frenchman.
Yeah, I mean, he's on a 4-fight.
More agile. Yeah. He's on a 4-fight win streak. He's very quick. He's agile from what I've, picked up. I know Emil is dangerous. It's going to be quite a fight. I'm sticking with Gomez. I think he has a little bit more cachet at the moment.
Yeah, so anyway, those are our picks, baby. In 2 weeks, when we come back to the show, we'll see how they panned out. Hopefully, this is helping you. I know we kind of cheaped out and took a lot of the favorites there, but hey, it's a light card, Dana. So to blame Dana, don't blame us because that's we gotta be safe with our picks. We gotta look like we're giving you, and then we're gonna end the show with our new favorite segment called "If You Were to Touch." Touching means you're gambling. Okay, we both don't do that anymore. We're not prescribing.
Touching the slate. Yeah,
touching
you touch the
slate. What we're doing right now here for people, I know people driving can't see, but anybody that's like, when you look at the full card, you're looking at the slate. Just so you guys know our terminology. So when you're touching the slate, you're going to pick somebody, you're gambling on that guy, okay? So really, the only big ones that we have for you this week, because I don't really think that we want, is the top 2 fights here. I think, we'll go to the first one. I think the first really great value pick is Cejudo. He's a plus 230. An ex-champ who has a great, it's not like, and Yadong's coming off a loss. I mean, he's younger, but it's not like he's mowing through everybody. So Cejudo has a chance here. I still pick Yadong overall, but if you're trying to win some money on this, double up your money, and you're not worried about losing a big chunk, that's not a bad pick. Would you agree there, Niko?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing, as that I chose Yadong to win the fight, but if you're thinking for putting a betting hat on, the Cejudo pick is a lot of value, a lot of upside, and you're going with someone really solid there, and you're investing your money in someone really solid. Again, I don't endorse the gambling for myself or for anyone, but if you were to touch, that would be the a good solid pick. I'd also put Brandon Allen in there as well. What is he plus?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now. So Brandon Allen, I mean, like, this is. Oh, here it is right at the bottom. He's a plus 220. So, I mean, that's like, to me, that's the big if you were to touch, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I would go there. I would go there and endorse a
so a plus 220 on Brendan Allen. He has a chance to nullify the wrestling of Hernandez, right? I mean, he's a great grappler. If they get to the feet, he has the advantage. He's just got to avoid the takedown. So it is a little bit risky, but it's a good payout. I mean, Brendan Allen, number 9 in the world, plus 220. How do you not touch that?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
true.
next time we'll be talking about the pay-per-view. We're probably going to have a lot more if you were to touch tips and tricks, but I really think those are the two ones that stood out to us. The rest are pretty clear, you know, so and they're not really all the value picks because we mostly took favorites. So with
But
that,
I would
yes.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say for the cop card, I do like that lane pick.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know, I do like the lane pick there just as a value.
Okay, let's just look
again,
at that.
it doesn't mean about when I say value, it doesn't mean it has to be the underdog that gives you more money. You could take the favorite fighter, but I just feel that like from a betting perspective, that a particular fight has a lot of upside. I want to put a lot on Lane, but it gives you
because
really
Lane is a plus 285 currently.
Yeah, and you're talking it's a heavyweight division. Anything goes. He really has a
right,
shot.
One
it's
shot.
Almost like a coin flip, more in terms of who wins or loses, but you're getting so much on the upside there. So that made sense to me.
All right, so with that, guys, I think we've come almost to the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to come back every 2 weeks, give you all that same analysis. So before I go to my outro, Niko, it was so great to have you come on. Thanks for doing this. How did you feel? Were you pumped to be part of this new edition?
I'm excited to be right in the thick of this. Excited about the inaugural session here that we've had, and looking forward to the next in 2 weeks from now. Picking up from where we left off, seeing how these cards played out, and continue to bring that pulse that both of us are going to bring here. So exciting.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for listening to the Wally Report, the world's hottest podcast. Please subscribe, follow, comment, like, share, and blast. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're blasting hard on the talk, and we're heavy on the gram at the Wally Report. That's at the Wally Report. We've actually been posting amazing video clips from our episodes on our social channels and important new show information, because normally we do TV shows, but now we need to maybe put some sports stuff up there too, because now we're in the sports world, baby. So don't miss out. And please make sure to comment on Spotify, comment on Instagram, comment on YouTube, comment on the talk. We love the comments and interactions with the fans. So with that, we're going to jam out to the tune one last time.